few years ago, Deborah Stoiber received a phone call from a man named Mr. Arthur, who lived in El Paso, Texas. He had a bunch of film in his garage, made from a material called cellulose nitrate.
He was not a film enthusiast. He didn't really like movies.
Deborah is a collection manager at the George Eastman Museum in Rochester, New York. She works in the moving image department.
What happened was that he won these films in a poker game many, many years ago. And his friend had put his nitrate collection on the table, and Mr. Arthur won the pot and refused to put the films back on the poker table. He wanted to send his friend a lesson that don't bet what you can't afford to lose. So he held on to these films for decades.
I gotta say, as a fan of pettiness, I really respect that commitment to teaching your friend a lesson.
Same. To be honest, I'm impressed. So by the time Mr. Arthur called Deborah, he was in his 90s, and his friend had passed away.
And he says, well, I don't need to hold on to these films anymore. I was just holding on to them just to put one over on my friend. Do you want them? So two of my colleagues actually flew to El Paso, Texas, and drove the entire collection back.
These poker bet winnings are now part of a collection of more than 25,000 reels of nitrate films stored by the Eastman Museum. They're kept in temperature and humidity-controlled vaults because, well, if they weren't, it wouldn't take much for them to go up in flames. Welcome to Tiny Matters. I'm Sam Jones, and I am joined by my co-host, Deboki Chakravarti. And today, we're going to the movies. Sort of. We're actually going on a journey into the chemistry of movie history. We'll talk about why super flammable nitrate material became so important to film history, and why people like Deborah are working so hard to conserve and preserve it.
Sam, I just wanted to say that I am super excited about this episode because I grew up for a while near Rochester, which is where the Eastman Kodak Company was founded by American entrepreneur George Eastman at the end of the 19th century. So I grew up with a lot of friends whose parents worked at Kodak, and I went to the Eastman Museum a bunch when I was little because it was just so cool. So working on this episode felt a bit like talking to a celebrity.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, comparatively, this was actually not something I had thought about at all. But I imagine that this experience for you would be like if I was able to go behind the scenes at the Museum of Science Boston, which was my number one childhood weekend hang growing up.
Yeah, it would be like that. So around 1878, George Eastman was going on a trip to the Caribbean. And like anyone about to travel, he wanted to be able to take some pictures. But these were still the early days of photography, and his camera was huge and used glass plates coated with a thin solution of egg whites and other chemicals, making the whole process really cumbersome.
Yeah, it's pretty different from the disposable cameras we were using as kids. No egg whites required.
No. We talked to Robert Shainbrook, who worked at Eastman Kodak Company for 35 years on film design development, and who also wrote an immense history of the company's products in a book titled Making Kodak Film. He told us that George Eastman, along with a man named William Walker, wanted to figure out how to make photography more accessible.
Having people handle glass plates was difficult. They were heavy, they broke easily, and many other problems.
So to find a replacement, they decided to start with paper. The paper was coated with an unhardened layer of gelatin, and then on top of that, there was a light-sensitive material coated onto the base with hardened gelatin.
In processing, they put it in hot water, the unhardened gelatin softened, and then the hardened gelatin, floated in the water, and you put it on a glass plate and then let it dry. Very complicated.
In that film, you can see the skeleton of what today is still the three main components of film. There's the support. In this case, we're talking about paper, and that makes up about 90% of the film's weight. Then about 7% of the film is gelatin, which is made mostly from cow bones. The last 3% are things like dyes and light-sensitive ingredients that you need for the actual imaging. Sounds simple enough. except that it's really easy for things to go wrong.
But it's always a miracle to me that so many things go right. Because if one tiny little thing goes wrong, you're not making saleable product. But one little piece of dust gets into the coated support, or there's a little wrinkle in the support, or there's a chemical imbalance in that things are not uniform, the whole thing doesn't work.
Robert told us a story from the early days of Eastman Kodak Company, when George Eastman realized that a bunch of films seemed to be going bad on the shelf. The culprit? Gelatin. Although Eastman didn't know why.
All he knew is if I buy gelatin from that, if I buy he was using hides and bone. If I buy hides and bone from that farmer, it works. If I buy it from that farmer, it doesn't work. So I don't use that farmer anymore. He shut his factory down, recalled all that film, and then replaced it with good product, which almost bankrupted him.
Eventually, someone realized that the issue came down to what the cows were eating. If the cows were eating mustard seed, their bodies would break that down and end up with a lot of sulfur that would get into the gelatin and mess up the film. So when the cows were moved to a different field, the problem went away.
That's wild that it could all come down to what your cows are eating.
I know.
So Eastman had figured out an accessible film for your average person for still photography. But making film for moving pictures that you would project onto a screen was a whole different beast. Here's Deborah again.
Still photography as we know it, modern still photography, had been around since 1839. But how do you make it move? How do you make it go into motion?
One of the requirements for projecting these films, it has to go through a mechanical device that grips the perforations and advances the film. And in some projectors, that advance and stop, advance and stop, advance and stop. So there's a lot of pressure.
So filmmakers needed something that would be both flexible and durable enough to run through a projector. And luckily for them, there was a material that could do this: cellulose nitrate, or nitrocellulose. It's also often referred to as simply nitrate.
And it was used as a form of plastic to make everything from billiard balls to the heels of ladies' shoes. It was used to make men's collar cuffs and different designs for crinoline skirts.
However, it had one other very bad aspect, in that it was not stable.
In addition to being referred to as nitrate, nitrocellulose is also known as gun cotton, which people used in the mid-19th century as ammunition because it was much more powerful than the traditional black powder that had been around for hundreds of years at that point. But nitrocellulose is also really unstable, making it a huge risk to work with. So people mostly moved on from gun cotton as ammunition. Unfortunately, when nitrocellulose was turned into film, it carried the same risk. And that made going to the movies a little bit dangerous.
If you ever have the opportunity to go into a motion picture projection booth, it's more like a bunker. It has all sorts of fire suppression and such because of the reputation. You know, theaters used to catch on fire because of the film.
And it wasn't just movie theaters. In 1929, a leaky steam pipe was getting fixed in the sub-basement of the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. As steam seeped out, it came in contact with the clinic's X-ray film, or to be more precise, the clinic's nitrate X-ray film, causing 2 huge explosions that sent fumes throughout the hospital.
And when it burns, cellulose nitrate has some terrible characteristics. One, it provides its own oxygen, so you can submerge it in water and it still burns. The fumes from cellulose nitrate are incredibly toxic. In the Cleveland Clinic fire, people took one breath and passed out. So hundreds of people were overcome by it, and 123 of them died.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, it is.
And so, understandably, George Eastman did not really like the idea of having a super unstable, inflammable product out there in the world. But it would take a long time for a replacement to enter the market.
Mr. Eastman was hyper about fire. His factory burned down a couple times, so he was hyper about fire. And when he had his house built in 1905, it was built to be fireproof. And then when motion pictures moved into the consumer world in the late 20s, it was mid-20s, he would not allow any motion picture film that might find its way to a home to be on cellulose nitrate because of the potential fire hazard.
Kodak spent millions of dollars working to find an alternative. One of the most promising was a material called cellulose acetate, which Eastman began selling to customers in the 1920s. Because it didn't go up in flames, the cellulose acetate-based film was called safety film. However, when it came to movie theaters, cellulose acetate took some time to catch on.
Nitrate's tough, acetate not so much.
Remember, one of the key things that motion picture film needed was durability. It's one thing for your home film to be filmed on something a little fragile, but a movie theater needs to be able to show the same film again and again and again.
So we've all seen either on TV, in movies, people watching a movie and the film breaks. The lights have to come on. The projectionist, my grandfather was a projectionist, by the way. The projectionist has to deal with an incredibly light, hot, bright light source, get the film out of the projector, take the place it was broken, cut out the bad piece of film, rewind this whole mess, and then make a splice and get it running again. I've been to theaters in which the film ripped, and it's a big deal.
On top of its durability, nitrate was also relatively cheap to make. But this was the 1920s and 30s, and this was a time where chemistry, including chemists working for film companies, was really getting a boost from some unexpected places, including World War I and II. For example, one of Kodak's competitors, a company called Agfa, was producing poison gas for Germany. For the US, Kodak was making weatherproof coating for airplane wings using cellulose acetate. That meant they were getting a lot of money to make tons of this material, which meant they also got better at making it.
Because if you're making something every day in large quantities, you've got lots of engineers around figuring out ways to do it better. And as a result, they got very good at making cellulose acetate.
So this new and improved cellulose acetate ended up replacing nitrate, making films and movie theaters much safer. But it's not like all of these old nitrate films just disappeared from the world.
Right. We've got old men holding on to their friends' nitrate film collections to make a point in poker games.
Exactly. But at the same time, many of these nitrate films have disappeared from the world because, again, these are super flammable materials. And more on that in just a moment. Wow If True is your one-stop internet culture shop, explaining how what's happening online shapes the real world. And they're the internet experts and real-life besties to unravel it. Tech culture journalist Amanda Silberling and science fiction author/attorney Isabel J. Kim Esquire. More importantly, they're the only podcast that will mention Neopets and horizontal mergers in the same episode. They're asking and answering your burning questions about the internet. Are the AI overlords coming to take our jobs? And if so, why are these AIs so awful at playing Pokemon? How does AI actually work anyway? Is Pepe the Frog a hate symbol or just a misunderstood green guy? And speaking of misunderstood green guys, why is Shrek still so popular? So check out Wow If True wherever on the internet you find your podcasts. New episodes every other Thursday. That's Wow If True from the Multitude Podcast Collective. All right, back to the show. In 2013, the Library of Congress announced that of the 11,000 films made in the U.S. during the silent period, only 3,311 were still around today. The rest had been lost because of the instability of the nitrate film they'd been printed on. So finding a way to conserve the films that are left is important for making sure that other parts of our history don't go up in flames. And that brings us back to the Eastman Museum and Deborah Stoiber's work.
We have 25,000 reels of nitrate film here at the George Eastman Museum, and they just cover a wide range of history, of chemistry, of filmmaking styles, of imagination, of storytelling, of actualities. We have a lot of films in our collection that are not only fiction, we have a lot of nonfiction. We have a lot of sports films.
And these reels come from all sorts of times and places. For example, Deborah told us the collection includes films made by the German government that the Allies took when they went into Berlin.
We are offered material every week coming from various locations all over the world, everything from studios to film enthusiasts to people who are cleaning out grandma's attic and they found some old films in there. We also get a lot of calls from abandoned movie theaters where people have moved out and the theater is either being torn down or it's being converted to another venue, and they found films in the old projection booth.
Given nitrocellulose's flammability, I'm really glad that Grandma's attic or an old projection booth didn't catch on fire when they were being cleaned out.
Totally.
I asked Deborah what her favorite piece in the collection is, and she mentioned two. The first is a silent film from 1916 called When Flowerland Awakens in Japan, which was a travelogue that would have introduced people at the time to Japan. It has hand-painted frames and beautiful, vibrant colors filling the cherry blossom trees and kimonos. The reel came to Deborah from a film collector in England.
And that was just such a nice gesture. And then to see how well he took care of these films for decades shows that, to me, that I'm not the only one who just really loves the old films, the old nitrate films. There's other people out there who are just as nerdy as I am who really care about these things.
Her other favorite materials are from the collection of legendary film producer David O. Selznick, where you can see famous actresses testing for classic movies like Rebecca and Gone with the Wind.
These are people who didn't get the roles, and so you can see them and you can see what was the thought process behind David O. Selznick and the different directors on trying to get certain colors and getting certain costumes and who was cast for this and who was cast for that. And that's some of my favorite stuff because it's the stuff that never made it to the screen, but was behind the process of making it to the screen.
Since 2015, the Eastman Museum has been putting on a film festival called the Nitrate Picture Show, featuring select movies from the collection, which is a really cool opportunity to see these pieces of history. But of course, we're talking about nitrocellulose here. It's unstable, which means it's a lot of work to keep these films presentable and safe.
There are two overall approaches to working with these films: conservation and preservation. Deborah's work is focused on the conservation side.
So conservation is keeping an eye on the film. It is making documentation of what you have. Is it a film that has foreign titles? Is it a film that's missing opening credits? Is it a film that's physically decaying? Does it have environmental damage? Is it moldy? Does it have rust stains? What else is going on with it? And to keep it lasting as long as possible, we want to conserve it for future use.
Meanwhile, preservation takes these conserved films and reprints them so they can be available for a modern audience. Deborah gave us an example from the 1931 film The Public Enemy, starring James Cagney. After it was released, the film was edited to meet the standards of Hollywood's Hays Code, which I had never heard of before, but which described the moral obligations that movies were supposed to meet.
They removed particular scenes from it of mostly Joan Blondell lying on the bed. It was too suggestive. So we actually have a print in our 16 millimeter film collection that still has those cuts in it. It was a print that was released overseas, and they didn't have to follow the same censorship cuts that happened in the United States. So when Warner Brothers went to do full preservation on the film, they asked to borrow our 16 millimeter print so that they can use those scenes to put the film back together as it was originally released. And so if you look at the preservation, if you look at the DVD out there, you'll see some scenes that look maybe not as in best of quality because those scenes are not in the original negative. They are in print here. So that's preservation.
When a new reel arrives at the collection, one of the first things Deborah and her team have to do is identify the film.
I always say open the can away from you. You never know what's inside. There could be bugs, there could be mold, there could be dirt, there could be love letters. You never know what's in there. So you just want to open it away from you and take a look at it. And you always want to wear gloves because, again, it's not necessarily you can worry about the oils in your hands, but you also want to worry about what's on the film. So a lot of films were stored on metal reels, and the reels were painted with lead paint.
Then Deborah has to go through the film and look for issues.
So I have specialized workbenches where I wind through the film through my thumb and my finger, and I'm feeling the edges, and I'm looking for any broken or cracked perforations or broken edges. But you're looking at the film itself, and you need to determine, is it nitrate? Is it safety? Is it negative? Is it positive? Is it color? Is it black and white? Does it have a soundtrack? But one of the main things we're looking at is what is the overall condition of the film, and how do we figure out what steps we want to do?
Some of these films need to be repaired because they weren't handled well by previous owners. And film just naturally shrinks over time, so Deborah has to keep track of that to make sure the reel doesn't end up on a large projector that's going to tear it to shreds. It's also important to assess just how decomposed the film might be. Deborah told us that there are 4 stages of nitrate decomposition.
The first stage that happens with nitrate decomposition is you get a strong odor. Nitrate, to me, smells like a wet dog wearing dirty gym socks. That's the best way I can describe it. It is a raunchy, decaying smell.
Super pleasant. Love that.
I know, it's horrible to imagine. After that is the second stage, where the nitrocellulose starts to get really soft and tacky. And if the reel is wound up, that tackiness can make the emulsion start to peel off from the base. Up until this point, you can still make a preservation print.
The third stage of nitrate decomp, it starts to actually bubble up, where the pieces of the nitrate are now starting to move around, and they're physically moving and breaking apart. And we like to call it, looks like a sunburn. It looks like it has blisters sitting on the edges of the film where it's literally boiling up on itself. Those blisters are very hard. They're not soft. They're not like gummy, chewing gum or anything. They're very, very hard bottles.
At this stage, the film starts to crystallize and turn to a light yellow color. This is called the hockey puck stage, and when a film reaches this point, it can't be printed or conserved any longer. The crystallized bits have to be taken out and destroyed according to state environmental law. After this is the last stage of nitrate decomposition, where the film turns into a powder.
It's a very brown powder. It's very fine. It's almost like baby powder, and it stains everything in sight. It'll stain the walls. It'll stain your clothes. It stains your hair, everything. And, if you breathe it in your nose, you'll be sneezing out of your nose for the next 3 days. So you definitely want to wear proper gear. You want to wear masks. You want to wear goggles. You want to wear gloves. You want to wear a smock, because at that point, it's kind of going everywhere, all over the floor, all over your workbench.
The one good thing about this last stage is that the film is no longer flammable. But the rest of the time, Deborah and her team are working with materials that can be incredibly destructive.
In 1954, the Eastman Museum built the first private nitrate vaults in the United States. They were temperature controlled, but they had no humidity control, and they quickly filled up. Cut to Memorial Day weekend, 1978, and it was unusually hot in Rochester. Some decaying film must have spontaneously combusted, leading to a fire in the vaults. And remember, nitrate makes its own oxygen while burning, so it's basically impossible to put out. You have to let it burn out, which means that this fire destroyed a large part of the Eastman's nitrate collection.
We still have a list of the stuff. And the one that's really tragic, the one that hurts the most, is that we lost the original camera negative, Technicolor negative for Singin' in the Rain. The only part that still exists is the Gotta Dance number with Sid Charisse, because that part of the negative had been loaned out to MGM to create the film That's Entertainment. So that's the only part that's still left.
After the fire, the Eastman Museum reached out to other archives and to the Library of Congress to ask for help. And the films that were left were sent to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. In 1995, the museum got the funding and land to build new nitrate vaults.
Our vaults are at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius, 30% relative humidity. For our nitrate vaults, we keep our films with fresh air exchange every 30 minutes. It's an 80% new air exchange, 20% recycled air going through our vaults. Each vault measures 1,000 cubic feet in size.
When you hear about those specifications, it really puts into perspective how much work goes into maintaining these collections. Digitization is great, but Deborah reminded us that the technology around it is always changing. So conserving and preserving these physical copies gives us an important way to hold on to our history.
And well, like most people, I do like movies, and I like what movies represent. We have films in our collections that you can't find anywhere else in the world. We have the only known copies. It's a lot of responsibility, but when you see how well it's being taken and you feel that responsibility, you really want to make sure you do a good job so that it lasts longer than your grandkids' lifetimes.
Growing up in Rochester, I heard about Kodak all the time, but I also lived there during a time when things were shifting. I think I got my first digital camera in middle school, and of course, now I'm always just using my phone to document things. But talking to both Robert and Deborah helped me appreciate that even though these technologies have changed so much, there's still so much to learn about their history. They both shared so many cool stories, and it was so hard to not be able to include every second of their interviews in here. So I'm just going to end with one last piece of advice from Deborah.
Try an old movie. Even if you think, oh, I don't know if I'll like a silent movie. Try, my favorite one is Sherlock Jr. It's 45 minutes. It's a great comedy with Buster Keaton. You can find it online even. You never know what you're going to find. Try something new. And if you don't like it, try something else. Just keep trying, because you never know what you're missing out on. You're missing out on a lot of really good technological innovation and creativity and science when you ignore the old films. How did they make those special effects happen without digital technology? Look at the way that they would make the volcano explode in an old Tarzan movie. It's really, really fascinating to see how you made that work and how it kind of made new innovations for today. But when you look to see where it really started, you can really appreciate more of what we have today in technology.
All right, Devoki, let's tiny show and tell.
Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent.
Okay, so I have a tiny show and tell about research that was done at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences.
Cool.
So I'm just going to tell you the setup. We're going to go right into it. They took 105 wild Atlantic salmon that were raised in captivity. They put an acoustic tracking tag on them. They also put an implant that could release materials into them. One of the implants was the control implant, released nothing. Second one, a compound called benzoylecgonine. Benzoylecgonine, that's what I'm calling it. The third one, we'll bring it all together. It was an implant that slowly released cocaine.
Okay, yes, I have seen this. Absolutely, yeah. I've seen this.
Okay, so we've looked up the pronunciation, everyone. It's benzoylecgonine, so I was very close. The thing that's important to know about it is that it's the main ingredient in cocaine. So they put these implants into the salmon. Some of them had a cocaine implant. Some of them had the cocaine ingredient implant. And they released these salmon back into a lake in Sweden. Mm-hmm. And then they went to go see what happened. So the fish with the benzoylecgonine implant swam up to 1.9 times further on average each week. So they swam more. They're like, I got to swim.
They were like, we got to go.
I got to rack up the miles. Yeah. They also went further away from the release site. And this was all for reasons that we don't completely know yet. I think given that the study is looking at cocaine and cocaine ingredients, it's easy to draw parallels.
And that ingredient specifically, that's a metabolite, right? That's produced when humans take cocaine.
Right. And that's one of the things that's really important about this study, because one of the things they found is that the benzoylecgonine had a stronger effect on the fish than cocaine. It wasn't exactly clear why, but this is relevant because usually when we do environmental risk assessments, we look at the parent compound, we would look at the effect of cocaine. We wouldn't look at the metabolites. But benzoylecgonine is actually found at higher concentrations in aquatic environments compared to cocaine because it's the metabolite.
Right. Because we're typically not dumping cocaine straight into a lake. What's happening is there's runoff and people have taken cocaine, metabolized it, and then the fish are impacted by the stuff that's running into their lake.
Yeah. I was going to say they're gobbling it up, but that's probably a better way to put it. So I think the study sounds a little bit funny, a little bit goofy, but it is relevant both for, understanding the difference between metabolites and parent compounds and the fact that they are different effects on these animals. But also, like, you know, the researchers say for like these particular fish, like these effects could be important because, you know, environmentally it might mean that like the fish are using up their energy on things that they shouldn't be doing. Like if they're just swimming, maybe that's energy they could have spent gathering food or something or growing.
That's such a good point because, of course, it's like tee-hee-hee. They're just like high and like on a stimulant. Yeah, and they're just swimming a ton. But like, right, like, what are the physiological costs?
Right. And, you know, another one they brought up, like I mentioned that they were ending up further away from the release site compared to the fish that had the implant that wasn't releasing these compounds. And, you know, that might mean that these fish are ending up in places that they're not really cut out for, like that they're just not actually, you know, not necessarily not meant to be in, but that they're not like adapted to, and that might not be beneficial for them. So there's ways that these compounds could be having a lot of downstream effects on animals.
Literally.
Yes.
Sorry, that was horrible. Downstream, it's a fish. I can't help it. Yeah, no, that's so interesting. This blew up on social media, I feel like. And at first, it just seems kind of funny, you know?
Right.
But ultimately, like, actually, it's not good.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the things that I liked about the study is it sounds silly, but then you read it and you're like, oh, I get why they're doing this.
Right. It definitely feels like an Ig Nobel Prize awardee, potentially, right? Like quote, silly research that makes you, what is it? It makes you laugh and then think.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this was for me. So thank you for bringing it. Now I'm like, wow, I don't know why I didn't think about covering that because I was hearing so much about it, but I guess it's good I didn't. Our listeners still have variety today.
Yep.
So, Deboki, I'm going to tell you about something that's, I guess, somewhat, I wouldn't say really related, but also we're thinking about environmental impact.
Aren't we always?
I know. I was going to say it's not really related. That's just on our brains. Okay, so I want to tell you about a former coal mining town that's doing something very cool and sustainable with their abandoned mine tunnels.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so this town is Cumberland, British Columbia. Apologies if that's not how people from Cumberland say it. But for decades, coal mining was really what this town did. It employed thousands of people, and the coal was sent around the globe. And then when it shut down around the mid to late 1960s, you had this huge economic downturn for the community, which we see that a lot, right? How many towns, cities in the United States have seen these big economic downturns because that whole community relies on X, and then X is no longer used or allowed or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But now the exciting and good news is that it looks like the same underground network that was used for coal mining could be used for clean energy. Oh. So this town, Cumberland, has partnered with the Accelerating Community Energy Transformation, ACET or ACET initiative, which is through the University of Victoria. And they're going to turn these abandoned mine shafts and tunnels into a geothermal energy source.
Oh.
So I feel like geothermal energy, correct me if you don't feel this way, but I feel like it's probably the clean energy source that we hear about the least, or at least one of the ones that we don't hear about often.
I agree. I think it's, at the very least, maybe this is a bad metric, but it's the one that I know the least about.
Yeah, I guess same. So, like, we talk a lot about solar. Obviously, we did an episode on wind energy.
Yeah.
But geothermal energy is something that people have been proposing for a long time. And also, I mean, that is on a small scale. If someone is in a community where you're using geothermal energy on a large scale, please write in because I'm so curious about it. But everything I've seen has been pretty small scale at this point. Mm-hmm. But essentially, geothermal energy is heat energy from the earth. Geo, earth, thermal, heat. So beneath the earth's surface, you have a lot of hot water. You have a lot of things, including hot water. And so that water can be brought to the surface for a variety of applications, including electricity, for instance. So you have heat energy, it's converted to steam, that will drive turbines and produce electricity. So now researchers are studying how hot water that's trapped in this old mine system can be used to generate geothermal energy that would be capable of heating and cooling buildings throughout this town, which I think is just so cool. And you would think if they do this, it will also open up economic opportunities, job opportunities. I just thought that this was so interesting. And there are so many abandoned mines
Yeah.
throughout the United States, throughout the world. But really, I think about the one I know the most about is the United States. And so if this worked, I'm just thinking about how transformative that could be for a number of communities.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think I always like the idea. I mean, obviously it doesn't always work out, but I always like the idea of repurposing where it's not just like, okay, the space is just
Let's fill it in and like let's level it, or let's fill it in with, you know, gravel, or cover it up and make it a parking lot or something.
And then also completely rework another space into like the new technology too. It's like, okay, we've already altered this once. Like, can we use it in another way that we can still like, just make good use of?
Right. Yeah. I thought this was very cool, and I hope that it continues to move forward because it's early days, but I thought this was really smart, and I hope it happens, and I hope it continues happening.
Yeah.
Yay, geothermal energy. Maybe we should do an episode about you.
Yeah, probably we should.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sam. And thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Tiny Matters, a podcast brought to you by the American Chemical Society and produced by Multitude. This week's script was written by me and edited by Michael David and by Sam, who is also our executive producer. It was fact-checked by Michelle Boucher. Our audio engineer is Misha Stanton. The Tiny Matters theme is by Michael Simonelli and the Charts and Leisure team.
Thanks so much to Deborah Stoiber and Robert Shanebrook for joining us. Go rate and review us wherever you listen. We super duper appreciate it. Also, if you have an idea, I know we do these call outs all the time saying, write us. We mean it. We respond.
We love it.
Yeah, we love it. So you can email tinymatters@acs.org. And we'll see you next time.